Hey Rain City, Matt here with a huge thank you to all of you rainmakers out there who helped us reach our $125,000 goal. We did it, you guys. And this means that local families received help with rent and bills, orphans in the developing world received care, and clean water access was given to thousands of people in Central African Republic and Ethiopia. Now stay tuned. In the next few weeks, we'll be sharing more details about all of these initiatives in our 2020 annual impact report. And one quick story from our friends at Water for Good. Your Rainmakers giving allowed us to be a part of an effort to bring clean water to 26,000 people this year, including the brand new solar-powered pump tank systems. Find out more at waterforgood.org on that. And in other big news, we've secured a new meeting space at Life Community Church in downtown Kirkland. It will be ours every Saturday for services and events. So let's take a look at the space now. Thanks, everybody, and stay tuned for info on our first in-person event. We'll see you soon.
He is jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of his wind and mercy. When all of a sudden I am unaware of these afflictions eclipsed by glory, and I realize just how beautiful you are and how great your affections are for me. And oh, how he loves us so. Oh, how he loves us. How he loves us so. is jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane, I am a tree, bending beneath the weight of his wind and mercy. When all of a sudden I am unaware of these afflictions eclipsed by glory, and I realize just how beautiful you are and how great your affections are for me. And oh, how he loves us so. Oh, how he loves us, how he loves us so. Yeah, he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. Yeah, he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. We are his portion and he is our prize, drawn to redemption by the grace in his eyes. If grace is an ocean, we're all sinking. Well, heaven meets earth like a sloppy wet kiss, and my heart turns violently inside of my chest. Well, I don't have time to maintain these regrets when I think about the way that he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. Yeah, he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. Yeah, he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves.
The wound is the place that the light enters you. Rumi. Hi everyone, it's your friend Scott. I want to talk to you about a story that happened in the Bible but is still happening today. A little quick vocab about things I'm interested in. One is a word called astronomy. Astronomy is actually a Russian literature term, and it means the art of making that which is familiar unfamiliar again. For me, when I read these things these stories from this book that I grew up with, I'm always trying to go, well, how do I unfamiliarize myself with what I think this story is about? And another reason I'm interested in talking about these old stories is because they're not just stories that happened back then, they are stories that are happening today. And so I want to look at this old story. It can be found in the book of Luke in chapter 7. Forgive me if I don't spend the whole time reading it. It is the story of the woman who comes to Jesus and washes his feet with her hair and her tears. You're probably familiar with it. It's in Luke 7. If you want to read it yourself, push pause, read it, and then come back to this video. The setting of the story is at Simon the Pharisee's house. Jesus has been invited over to have a meal with some other religious leaders or whatever they're doing, and they're sitting together having a conversation, and then this woman bursts in and washes his feet with her hair and her tears. Now, to give you a visual of what's going on, because it says the woman comes up behind him, so we're used to like sitting like this, and if somebody came up behind me, you're like, whoa, whoa, what's happening? But in this ancient culture, what people did, it's actually good, we should do this again, but they, the food would be in the center, and then everybody's kind of laid out, facing each other, looking, but their feet would be back towards the edge because their feet would be, dirty or nasty or, smell like bad tivas or something like that. So I just want to talk through a few points and interests about this story. The first thing is that the scandal of this story is that Jesus forgives sins. What? No, that's so crazy. Can you imagine Jesus forgiving sins? I know it's kind of lost on us, right? Isn't that what Jesus does? But that's because we don't live in a temple society anymore. You got to understand that back then, that forgiving sins meant getting an animal, like a thing that you maybe loved or had feelings for, and you took it to a temple and right? And you spilled blood, and then there was this whole ceremony, and that's how sins were forgiven. And preferably the animal of choice was a lamb, but if you were poor or a professional artist, you could use like a dove. So for Jesus to turn to this woman and say, your sins are forgiven, to a group of people who are professional sin forgivers, they're part of the sin forgiveness system. They're like, no, hold up. You can't just do that. There's this whole thing that you have to do. For Jesus to say your sins are forgiven is to allude to a change that's coming, a removal of things that are in the way, an avenue for restoration. Some followers of Jesus who wrote some books in the Bible, they said that we saw the glory of God and it was full of grace and truth. What is grace? Grace is presence not withheld. It's basically, grace is getting what you don't deserve, right? It's saying like, whatever you can do, I'm not going to withhold my presence. Nothing can stand in between the love I have for you. So what the gospel writers are saying is what we know about God is that God is all about forgiveness, forgivenness, like getting everything out of the way so that there can be a connection. And we see Jesus proclaiming the same thing, like, nothing's going to separate you from my love. Another really interesting thing here is that when this woman is washing Jesus' feet, the leaders began talking about if he only knew what kind of woman this was. And Jesus says, Simon, do you see this woman? Do you see this woman? Now, why is this woman even here? It was not uncommon in an ancient context when a visiting rabbi would come into town that the religious leaders of the area would invite them into their home, and then they would have a conversation. And it was not uncommon for other people to come, people in the community, to come and listen in on this religious conversation. Imagine like a live podcasting, all right? It was kind of the ancient live podcasting. Here are all there's these rabbis, these teachers, and they're having this discussion, and people can listen in on what they're talking about. So there's lots of people gathered, including this woman who's there. Now, we don't know a lot about this woman, but it says that she's a sinner. And apparently the people in the community also know her as that. Now, it doesn't say anything in there necessarily that she is a prostitute or, a lady of the night or something like that, but it's okay to assume that because of the context and the kind of the shame and the conversation around it. It's interesting all the assumptions we can make about somebody like that. We have a lot of opinions or maybe uncomfortabilities with somebody like that, but I would like to point out that I've never heard my 8-year-old daughter or any 8-year-old girl go, I'd like to make a living one day by selling my body to men. I'd like to make a living by engaging in this act in order to pay for my bills. This is not a story about some crazy loose lady of the night. This is a story about a broken woman. Nobody just enters into prostitution. Nobody just falls down some stairs into it. There's a long series of awful, awful things that lead somebody to do this. And so this is not a story about somebody who's just doesn't have any morals. This is about a broken woman. Also, the word sinner really just means heathen. She wasn't the only sinner in that whole room. Everybody was a sinner. But what heathen means is that she was not partaking in the temple system. Maybe she wasn't Jewish, or maybe maybe there's a lot of reasons. Maybe she couldn't even afford to be a part of the temple system. In another passage, and actually all of the Gospels when this story is mentioned, when Jesus goes to the temple and overturns the tables and clears them out, in all the passages it says he goes to the dove sellers because the doves were allotted to the poor. And why Jesus is so angry is that the dove sellers, who are supposed to be able to offer a way of forgiveness to the poor, were jacking up the prices and making money off of them. And Jesus is like, stop getting in the way of people trying to know God, of people trying to be restored to the love and grace of God. So maybe she couldn't partake in this system. Maybe she was prevented from partaking in it, or she couldn't afford to partake in it. But somewhere along the line, she heard Jesus speak, and she was like, there's an answer there. And so she comes to the house of the Pharisee. She comes to like one of the religious leader in the community's homes, and other people are gathered there. And like, imagine, look, so this is the moment we need to like unknow what we think, or we need to think about it. Imagine the courage it must have taken for a woman who's known in a community to be a sinner to come in their midst. And they're just like, oh yeah, there's so-and-so, right? And she came with an intentionality. Now, we know that she came with some perfume, because she's like, I can't offer this, or I'm not partaking in the system, but I have this. I can bring this to Jesus. It's the best thing I have, which is this perfume. And she only brought perfume because it was very typical, if not common practice, for a guest, when a guest came in somebody's home, that their feet would have been washed. It's a normal custom. And she assumed that that would have been done for a great guest like Jesus. So look, envision it with me. Maybe they're like gathered around and she's just there and she's like, when's the right moment to do this? I'm just going to break in. And she turns the corner, right? She turns the corner and she sees that Jesus's feet are dirty still. They're not washed. And look, she can't put her perfume on dirty feet. It'll ruin the perfume. But she didn't bring a water basin or a jug or a cloth, anything to wash his feet. And so she's there. She's like, everybody probably like looked up. Here's this woman entering into this space full of men. And she's like, I'm here to do this thing. Wait, his feet aren't washed. I don't have any, there's nothing to wash his feet. I don't have anything to wash his feet. All I have is my body. All I have is my body, and that's not good enough. You don't know what I do with my body. I can't use that. But she does. She does. And maybe it's that moment of realizing this is not good enough, but that breaks the tears. And they come forth. And she uses that liquid that's coming from her very being and uses it to clean his feet. And then she dries with her hair. And then she puts the perfume on. And Jesus says, Simon, do you see this woman? Do you see the love that is being poured out in this moment? All you see is something else. Do you really see this woman? The wound is the place that the light enters us. Her wound was the place that the light entered her. Your sins are forgiven. You have loved much. A certain time later, Jesus is gathered with his disciples, and he's about to be arrested and tortured and murdered. And he has some inkling of that's going to happen. And he wants to leave an example to his disciples about what it means to love one another. The times I get most bored with Jesus is when I think that Jesus knows everything already. Like, imagine having a conversation with him and he's like, oh, how was your day? And you're like, well, it was kind of crazy. I woke up and he's like, I'm just kidding. I already know it all, right? Like, there's an aspect of our faith or our idea or relationship with God where like everything's already known, and that's kind of boring. But what we see throughout the stories in the Gospels is that people surprise Jesus. People will say things to him and he's like, whoa, I did not see that coming. And because Jesus was a human being, yes, God, but also a human being. And Jesus didn't come with a script where he's just like, What are we talking about today? Oh yeah, sowers and seeds. Great. Jesus is a human who saw a neighbor or a farmer sowing seeds and was like, oh yeah, that's what God's like. You know, he had neighbors and friends. One of the sons was just like, I want money from you, Dad, and I want to go party. And there's this whole thing, and Jesus is like, oh yeah, that's what God's like. And he's using these stories, he's witnessing these things, and he's going, this is what God's like. So on the night that Jesus is going to be betrayed, before he has dinner with his friends, he gets down and he washes the feet of all of his friends. He takes this custom and flips it and says, this is an example. Where did he first see somebody do that? Where did he see somebody take something that's just a custom and turn it into an act of self-emptying love? He saw it when this woman, when she let her wound be the avenue that the light could get in. Can we astonish God? Can our lives be surprising to God? Can we do things that Jesus would go, I didn't see that coming? I don't know about you, but in this really difficult season of life, a lot of my strengths and capabilities have not been going well. And I'm very present with a lot of my wounds and my weaknesses. And often, in the religious narrative in my head, I can go, those wounds and weaknesses are what dismisses me from partaking in a life with God. When in actuality, it's the wound that lets the light enter in. I don't know where you're at, but I hope you're well. But I would like you to enter into a story that's happening right now. Now, no matter how much shame you feel, or sadness, or weaknesses, or all of those things, that those could be the very places that allow you to astonish God, that allow you a place of self-emptying love, and that it would be a surprise. When Jesus resurrects from the dead, he appears to his disciples and he shows them his wounds. And he says, just as I was sent, so will you be sent. And may we realize that our wounds are the place that light, love, the divine can enter in to our lives. Grace and peace to you.